Good evening, members of committee, staff, ladies and gentlemen. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting of General Committee for Monday, June 18th, 2012 to order. We'll begin with the adoption of the agenda. It has been moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Papp, that the agenda for the June 18th, 2012 regular meeting of General Committee be adopted. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? I would ask that we have a number of members here from the public. I believe most of them are here for planning matters, which are currently later on in the agenda. I propose that maybe a councillor could move that we move that ahead, perhaps ahead of corporate services, and then deal with the remainder of the agenda. So moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that we change the order of the agenda so that we will do delegations, the consent agenda items, and then when we move into business subdivisions, we'll do planning and development services. Perfect. Chaired by Councillor Papp first. Okay. I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. That amendment is carried. And now to the main motion as amended. There being no changes, I call the question. All those in favor? That motion is carried. As amended. Thank you. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Do members of committee have any pecuniary interest that they wish to disclose at this time? Councillor Clark?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Item 4.2A and 8.3A to deal with Wayland Heights subdivision. Mr. Wayland and I have done business in the past and may do business in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Duly noted. Others? There being none, if that can be noted as well. The first item is a delegation by Oscar Wayland, extension of draft plan approval for Wayland Heights subdivision. Councillor Clark is leaving the chamber. Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Wayland, thank you for joining us this evening. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Mayor Dave Augustine and members of council. I'm Oscar Wayland, and I'm here to request an extension for draft plan approval of Wayland Heights. In my letter that I sent you, which stated my reasons why a draft plan extension is needed at this time. And first, I gave you a little bit of background information about the property. We owned it since 1984, and then a little later, my brother built the Wayland Heights Professional Center, which is now the Professional Center on Highway 20. And he will also be involved in the development of Wayland Heights in the future. So that's the new information I have for you. I also have some comments regarding the draft plan itself, and all agency conditions have been approved, and we are now ready to proceed with the development as soon as possible. However, as I stated in my letter, there are a number of factors affecting the completion and signing of the Wayland Heights subdivision agreement at this time. An extension of the draft plan approval is needed. So first, I mentioned the economy. We all know the economy in Niagara area needs to improve. The big industries are gone, and unemployment is one of the highest in the Niagara, in Ontario actually. And new housing starts in Pelham are at the lowest. 38, 43, 46 respectively for 09, 010, and 11. And I remember a banner year in 86 when 163 units were built. The economy is one reason why the development has been delayed. We are now ready to move ahead. We have three developments in Area 1. And if we all work together and are willing to compromise, and on some issues, things will get done. Jobs will be created, and future revenues for the town will be secured. Factor 2 deals with cost sharing. And when I look at the cost sharing for Area 1, most of them are estimated values. estimated values. But we are making progress on some cost-sharing issues. The estimated values need to be reviewed and substantiated. These costs have also slowed the progress of development for Area 1. The next factor I had listed were the 10 lots on Hay Street. They are serviced with water, sewer, and gas. Now, the draft plan requires that the big stormwater management pond for the whole subdivision needs to be constructed first. And that would be at a cost of about $275,000. Now, we have made some progress after a few meetings last summer, and the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority agreed that the construction of a temporary facility, swales behind the 10 lots on Haste Road, could be built, and the subdivision could go ahead for the 10 lots. After this temporary swales have been constructed, then immediately after that, the stormwater management will be built for the whole subdivision, and the Conservation Authority agreed to that. Building homes on the 10 service lots this year, followed by servicing the entire development, are my immediate plans. And factor number 4 refers to road access to Wayland Heights. The draft plan only makes one reference to road access in condition number 37, and it simply says no access to road to Hay Street until Hay Street is improved. It doesn't mention anything about internal road access for Wayland Heights. So Hay Street has been improved, but I still do not have entrance to Hay Street because Road A has not been constructed. The Northwest Hill secondary plan clarifies the situation by stating that internal road access must be secured. This has been done, and therefore I do have access to Lookout Street. Also, the region states that as a condition of draft plan approval, in order to secure adequate access. That again reiterates that I have access through Lookout Street. But then, when I read the subdividers agreement Schedule B, number 4, and I think you have it in front of you, it says this: the developer shall restrict all servicing construction access to Lookout Street. And the developer shall make its best efforts to restrict all residential building construction traffic access to Lookout Street, and shall demonstrate in writing how it will use its best effort in this regard to the director prior to release of building permits. So with no permitted access or exit to Lookout Street, and similarly no access or exit available to Hay Street, then I presume there will be no servicing, construction, and building permits issued in the near future, because I do not have an entrance or an exit. And that's where it stands now, according to the subdividers agreement. So I'm in a predicament. How can I sign this agreement when I only have 1 year to complete the primary services and 18 months of secondary services? And also there's a statement in the subdividers agreement which says the town will enforce each and every term of the subdividers agreement. So once you sign it, then the town will enforce the agreement. So if I would sign this and the subdividers agreement says no entrance or exit through Lookout, then I'm stuck. No one would sign the agreement unless you would have an entrance and exit out of the subdivision. Makes common sense. So there are other conflicting provisions in the subdivider's agreement, because when I started to read it, I found other things in here. For example, it states that I should pay for construction of sidewalks on Lookout Street. It's right in here. I'm not on Lookout Street, I'm on Hay Street. And something about sewers on the east side of Lookout Street. And also underground electrical installations for Lookout Street. I would be accountable for that. So there are certainly things in here which need to be changed. And as I stated, I sincerely believe that additional time is warranted in order to achieve some practical solutions to my concerns. For the size of this development, many issues and conditions need to be dealt with, and agreements in the subdivider's agreement must be thoroughly substantiated and approved by the director before being signed, and a one-year extension would not be sufficient time, especially if legal issues arise or even an OMB hearing is necessary. Respectfully, I request that a draft plan extension be approved for a 3-year period in order to allow sufficient time to deal with any unforeseen problems. I'm committed to moving ahead with the development this year. First, the 10 service lots should be developed because they have services, and the town has provided the services, and I owe the town money for that, so they get paid for that, of course. And then next, the final draft plan agreement will be signed, and after that, followed by the subdivider's agreement. As I stated in my last paragraph in the letter to you, I'm confident that within a time frame of 3 years, Wheeland Heights, in cooperation with Constiano, they're the new owners of Mountain View Phase 2 property, Constiano Developments, and Luchetta Construction will succeed in making Area 1 the destination place for many proud new home owners in Fonthill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen, for your
My
presentation.
report.
Thank you. I wonder if members of committee have any questions for you at this time. I have a question, and it's relating to those sidewalks. You said that the agreement that you have talks about Lookout Street. Under number 13 here, it says, "The owner shall construct sidewalks along Hay Street frontage of the subject lands." Is that the same agreement that we have? Is it number 13 there in the agreement that you have?
In the subdivider's agreement?
That's what you were referring to. The copy we have says Hay Street. You allege that it said Lookout Street. Mr. Larmer?
The attachment to the report is the conditions of draft approval.
Oh, I see, as opposed to the agreement.
Mr. Whalen's reference is to the draft agreement that was provided to him in 2008.
Right.
And it's an
Okay.
agreement that his consultant, Upper Canada Consultants, had prepared.
Which is already signed.
No, it's a draft agreement.
Oh, I
It was
see.
provided to Mr. Whalen about 4 years ago.
Okay.
And because it was draft, we recognize that there may be some discrepancies in it, and that was the purpose of providing it to him then.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Whalen? Councillor Kersey?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Forgive me, Mr. Whalen, for asking this question. I'm a newbie here, so it appears to me that you got initial approval for draft plan in 2004.
Right.
And we are now almost 9 years out, 8 years out for sure,
Right.
from that date. I guess I find it a little bit confusing as a businessman that we've had 8 years in time transpire, and yet we still have not been able to iron out all of these little details, which now I guess we're being asked to accept that you're gonna be able to iron out over the next 3 years, should we give you another 3-year extension. So I guess I'm asking you, how can you extend confidence to us as a council to grant that 3-year extension, an additional 3-year extension, when we haven't been able to work out those details over the preceding 8 years?
Well, first of all, the draft plan conditions have all been fulfilled, and that took a long time. The archaeological, the Ministry of Environment, the soil testing, the monitoring of the water system, it took a long time, years and years and years, back and forth, back and forth. So that was the first part. I had a draft plan extension in 2009. That's when the number of lots changed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, after 2009, the market went, and the development went way down. The lots there were no buyers, and even a lot of developers wanted to buy the property. There were a lot of them. Craig knows that. He had a lot of phone calls, but they all walked away because they just couldn't see it with the economic conditions that were prevalent then. Even my neighbor, it's a fourth owner now. First it was Maury, then it was Walker Developments and Luchetta. Now it is Conscian. So there is a problem as far as financing is concerned. Okay?
Thank you. Councilor?
Unfortunately, the financing issue is an issue that you as a businessman have to deal with. We as council have to look at the progress of approval of these developments and what have you. And I guess my question, again, I'm going to go back to the question if in the last 3 years, when you did get some alteration to your draft plan, there was some contingencies given to you at that point. Did you not continue to work on this and to try and work out those number of issues that you've put forward to us tonight? I mean, I'm surprised that in all this time, we haven't been able to come to a conclusion.
Well, even up to last Christmas, the property was sold just that close. And the three builders, I think Craig would know that, the three builders were intensely involved in this, and they were going to take it over, and construction was going to start. This just happened just at Christmas time. And that's when the financial arrangements fell apart. Because no one would take those arrangements and go through with a deal. I could tell you what the arrangements were, but you probably would shake your head because that's not how to run a business. Okay. But now we are ready. As I said, my brother's involved in the development. He has a very excellent track record. He knows numerous plazas and also industrial buildings, and he has that plaza on Highway 20, and he loves Font Hills. He says, Oscar, why don't we do it together? And that's what we are going to do. And we're going to do it as soon as possible. As soon as some of these problems are straightened out, we'll be signing the subdividers agreement.
And can you quantify a timeline for us on when you would expect a date that you would expect to work towards to finalize dealing with these remaining few issues and to actually get to the point of signing that agreement?
Well,
Can you
first
make
of
a
all,
commitment to that?
yeah, first of all, I think the 10 lots on Hay Street would be a good starting point. Once we get approval for those, that would be the key to get everything rolling. I would say next year, when all these problems with the subdividers agreement are solved and analyzed, and we agree with all those, I would say next year, maybe over the winter, we'll have. If I get a contractor who's available to start putting the services in, might happen this winter, but next year at the latest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other members? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. We'll certainly consider it as we consider that planning report moving forward. It has been moved by Councillor Papp, second by Councillor Kersey, that the information presented in the delegation by Oscar Whelan regarding the extension of draft plan approval for Whelan Heights subdivision be received. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. That motion is carried. I would ask that perhaps Councillor Beatty, you'd ask Councillor Clark to join us again. Our next item is a presentation by Stephen Bedford regarding Oak Haven subdivision, official plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment. Mr. Bedford, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Good evening. Mayor, councilors, staff, members of the public. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Stephen Bedford. I'm a planning consultant based in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And with me tonight is, representing the owners, is Mr. Woods. He was with you during the public meeting last September. I've had an opportunity to review the report prepared by your staff. I'm here to indicate to you that we are fully supportive of the report and the recommendations that are made by Craig in the report. To get to this point, we've had to do significant amount of background work. Some of the studies this previous gentleman was talking about, Craig already has in his hands. The agencies have agreed with those draft studies, and Craig's in a position to make the recommendations that he has this evening. And now, there we go. And we're here to talk about Oak Haven Estates. This subdivision is proposed to have 22 single detached dwellings, 8 townhouses, 48 condos, which total 84 units. That's the subdivision that is being recommended this evening. That is not the subdivision you see on the sign when you drive past the subdivision, because this subdivision, as a result of the circulation, had to undergo some changes, which the owners did participate in, and so the density has increased, but also has, in response to the environmental assessment that was done, etc., there's been changes to the layout that included such things as special removal of a lot in here, so that the vegetation along this end of the property, in fact, could be saved, and Craig is going to include in the zoning bylaw when it comes before you setbacks from the woodlot. There was a public meeting September 12, 2011. In reviewing the minutes of the meeting, or at least the minutes as set out in council's minutes, the issues that were raised: fish habitat along the north property boundary, water pressure in the area. There was significant concern about stormwater management and groundwater, the density of this development, and the type of homes that are being proposed here. Those were the kinds of things that were raised at the meeting. The fish habitat and the water course, the water existing along the north side of the property boundary, we've had an environmental assessment done that's been reviewed by the Conservation Authority, and they're in fact in a position to move the development on to the next step. Water pressure, in fact, in looping the water main as a result of introducing this subdivision will in fact increase the water pressure for all the people around it. At the moment, there are dead end mains, and this looping will deal with that. Stormwater management and groundwater is a significant issue for the residents, and I have some suggestions further on in terms of how to perhaps provide some technical information that may assist them. We believe the conditions that Craig has recommended within the report that you have are sufficient, but we'd like to suggest some additional conditions. And I'll show you some pictures of the types of homes that we've seen built on the lots of the size that you're going to see this evening. Now, on June 14th, I invited councilors by email, and the residents who spoke at the public meeting last September, I phoned them and invited to the meeting June 14th. That was last Thursday. It's unfortunate that it was last Thursday, 4 days ahead of this meeting. However, this meeting was originally intended to be 2 weeks ago. Craig was ready to bring this report 2 weeks ago, but I felt it was important to try and talk to the residents, given the comments that were in the minutes from the last last September meeting. And so we did call the meeting. We had about 10 people arrive, and we did have a great conversation about what the people's concerns were, and I tried to respond to some of them, and I have a couple of suggestions in here with respect to dealing with a couple of the concerns that we may have. As I mentioned previously, the kind of work that's already been done in order to allow Craig to make this kind of recommendation has been an environmental impact study, a sanitary servicing study, a geotechnical analysis, boreholes, sampling of the soil samples, a preliminary stormwater management study, a traffic impact study, and an archaeological assessment. All in each case, the staff are in a position to recommend that we are ready to go on to the next step in terms of draft approval. One of the, if I might, the report that Craig has prepared inadvertently left out the fact that the Conservation Authority, in fact, no longer has concerns with the stormwater management, and in fact has given approval last October as a result of additional work that has been done on this particular property. So it says, NPCA is now satisfied with the preliminary stormwater management design and sizing of the stormwater management plan, Block 33. And that was a concern that the neighbors have raised. I can totally understand that concern, and I wanted to share with you this evening that point that was raised in Craig's report that, in fact, at this point has been resolved. Now, one of the issues that is of major concern to, in fact, the property owner and the residents was the fact that the provincial policy statement, which has come into place relatively recently in terms of the development of our communities, and I know we face this in Niagara-on-the-Lake just as you do here in the various villages in Pelham. What is now expected by provincial policy is a different level of density as a result of the PPS. And in this particular case, 84 units are required to be built in this subdivision. Now, I'd like to refer you to the letter from the region, which is in your package. And the region quite clearly says it identifies this property as a greenfield overlay, which requires a density of 50 persons, people, or jobs per hectare. And it is that kind of comment which is driving the density. The original request by the developer was not 84 units. And just to underscore that, if you turn to the last page of the region's letter, page 4, the region has gone so far as to say that the amending zoning bylaw should specify the minimum of number of on-street units and the minimum number of block townhouse units, 48, within the subdivision. So not only are they speaking to the policy of 50 persons per acre, but they're also speaking to the level of detail of enforcement and implementation. So that speaks to me that they're pretty serious about this desire. So while density is in your hands, we are also in the region's hands, as you are, in trying to deal with the provincial policy statement. However, Craig, in his recommendation, has recommended on the townhouse units that a maximum of 84 townhouse units be permitted. So that does give the property owner and the town, in fact, through the site plan agreement process, which is the next level of detail for the development of these townhouses, the ability, should they wish, of reducing the number from 84. So 84 is the maximum. Sorry, the number of the townhouses is the maximum.
It's 48, right?
48. Thank you very much. 48. There you are.
There it is.
48 townhouses. Now, when people see small lots after living in large lots, people say, "Oh my God, what's going to happen to my neighborhood?" And I can understand that. But when I see here, these houses are built in Lincoln on 14-meter lots. They look very nice. These are freehold townhouses. These are freehold townhouses that are in fact in Font Hill. And these are the rear yards of freehold townhouses. Now, yes, they are on smaller lots slightly smaller than those that you see around, but I'm sure that you can agree with me that these houses are quite lovely homes and would be really a pleasure to see in any neighborhood. So what we're here tonight to ask you is to approve the report and recommendation that Craig has put before you. The subdivision as proposed complies with the PPS, and it does meet all of the technical requirements as stated by Craig in his report. However, when we were meeting with the neighbors the other evening, there were significant concerns about the groundwater, stormwater management, and surface water and groundwater. And so I have a couple of thoughts in order to try and give people confidence in the fact that the technical recommendations that are being made by Craig and will be vetted by the engineers and vetted by the Conservation Authority will in fact work. And as well, there was a concern that there was some fill put on the subdivision some time ago, and the fill is there, but there hasn't been any analysis of the fill with respect to whether it's clean or not. The owner is quite prepared as part of the subdivision agreement to add a condition to in fact analyze that fill to ensure it's clean, and if it isn't, to take whatever remedies are necessary. I'd just like to give you a couple of recommended suggestions to the conditions of approval to hopefully give the neighbors and council the confidence that the work that the developer has done and is prepared to do will result in a subdivision in this neighborhood that everyone will be proud of. Craig, I don't know whether you'd like to comment. So we're fully supportive of the staff recommendation. The suggested amendments are, the fill on the site has not been analyzed. So amendment number 1 would be to add a condition to the draft plan, to the draft conditions, that prior to final approval of this plan, that the owner have the soil quality of the fill analyzed and necessary cleanups be taken should they be required at the cost of the owner. So that, I hope, would give the residents the confidence that the fill that was put there many years ago, certainly out of the control of myself and our ability at the moment to deal with it, the best thing we can do is to ensure that it is clean fill, and that if it isn't, we deal with it. The neighbors have significant concern, as I stated, with respect to the groundwater, stormwater, and as a condition, we believe condition 18 is fine. In any place that I've worked before, condition 18 covers all the bases. Council should be confident to accept condition 18, and any requirements that you might have with respect to stormwater management would be properly looked after. However, given that, I don't have the sense that the neighbors are confident. They're in an area where there is a lot of groundwater, and they're also in an area where I understand there's a stormwater management pond that's had a little bit of a checkered background. And so what I'm suggesting is that we add to condition A, 18A, a 18C. And that 18C would state that the engineer is developing the stormwater management plan. So that's moving from the general plan that you have now to a far more detailed engineered plan. Consult with the neighbors to ensure they are fully aware of the design work, to ensure both groundwater and surface water is fully reviewed by the approval authorities. I would expect 2 meetings. 2 meetings would be anticipated. The first would be before the detailed design work begins, so that the neighbors would have an opportunity to understand the parameters, the engineering parameters of what they're going to do to design this thing. I would expect that the Conservation Authority and the town engineer would also be there, so everyone would understand what we're designing here. And then the second so the assumption would be identified, and the next meeting would be held after the design has been done, to explain the design to the neighbors, so that they can ask questions, so that they can understand that the design will work, at least to quiz the engineers who, in fact, whose reputation is on the line with respect to this, to the design, so that they will know its work. Now, in my 40 years of being in this business, this is the first time I've seen a public participation process in the technical review of a stormwater management plan. We're happy to do that. We don't want to create a problem here. We want the neighbors to feel this subdivision is going to work and they're confident. So with that, I'd like to request council support of the staff recommendation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bedford, for your presentation. I wonder if members of council have questions for Mr. Bedford, who's a registered agent of the applicant. Councillor Rivak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Bedford, for your report this evening. And just a quick comment before my question. I'm certainly pleased, and I'm sure my colleagues are, and perhaps those in the audience who are here with respect to this issue are pleased that the developer is looking at their concerns and wanting to make progress. I'm sorry that I didn't make the meeting on the 14th. I've heard a little bit about it, and I'd just like to expand a little bit of my own understanding, and in particular with regard to how it fits into the offers that you're making this evening with regard to conditions. My understanding is, and perhaps you can explain for my benefit, that part of the lack of confidence, as you put it, of those in the area with regard to planning around stormwater management is that the data that you are using, or that the developer is using, is as a result of testing and study done at a particular time of year. I think it was October. Is that part of the discussion that you had with them? And maybe you can expand on that.
Mr. Bedford?
Sure. That was part of the conversation that we had. The engineers, so what we did the geotechnical survey. So we went out there and drilled 8 boreholes. The boreholes were scattered around the property, and one, in fact, was where the stormwater management pond is. And those boreholes identified where the water table is. And when in reviewing the data around the boreholes, it indicated that the boreholes were done in October. And in any year, October is usually drier than March. And so there was some concern about the fact that the boreholes and the water table might in fact be lower than it might be in March or April. And it was that depth of the water table that led to the design of the stormwater management pond. And so that's one of the things in response to that, and I have an email into Craig, was that we'd also like to get the boreholes that were done for the subdivision immediately to the south. They would have had to do boreholes as well. And we'd just like to get just to compare. How deep is the water table for the subdivision to the south, and how deep is the water table here, to compare. But I think the condition that I have added with respect to the stormwater management, if there's a requirement as a result of additional concern, for instance, if we find the boreholes on the subdivision to the south showed a much higher water table, then that's information, as well as the information we're getting from the residents, to indicate maybe we need to do a little bit more work with respect to understanding the depth of the water table. And so that's a step that would be taken, as I've indicated and as Craig has indicated, in terms of preparation of the final stormwater management plan. We understand fully there's a concern with groundwater, and we're trying to ensure that you have all the information you need. So that was that request is into Craig, but that's something that we would anticipate occurring, meeting the conditions of draft plan rather than prior to draft plan.
Okay, Councillor?
Thank you, and that's good to hear. I wonder, though, whether your offer to review the stormwater management design might not include an offer to do some data analysis of the actual area in March or April, when the water is actually present and available to be looked at. I wonder if that could be part of what the developer might offer by way of a condition.
I think that's a good idea, a good thought. I'm not a stormwater management engineer, so I don't know. But I would suggest that that would be one of the things we would put in front of the engineers, not Conservation Authority, town engineers, and our engineer, with the residents. When is the best time to do this? And if in fact we found that the subdivision to the south had inconsistent values to the information we found, and there was real validity to your request, then they would decide at that time. But that's information, we have no hesitation saying that, but I think we need to know that would be the recommendations of the engineers who were doing the work. So they would hear from the residents. We'd have the engineers from the agencies involved being part of that decision. We have no hassle with that conversation at all.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what I'm hearing is that the developer is understanding that the data with respect to both groundwater and surface water with which he's been working to this point might not be completely accurate, and that he's willing to look for more data, hopefully taken at different times of the year in order to understand exactly where the water tables are.
In fairness, I'm not sure Mr. Bedford stated that. I think he stated that the developer is open to working together with residents. Mr. Bedford?
Yes, thank you. I don't think I would suggest for 1 minute that the information that's before you in terms of the geological data is incorrect or flawed. But what we are prepared, based on additional conversation and feedback from the Conservation Authority, the town's engineers, that if it's appropriate to do additional drilling, we're prepared to do that.
To change topic just a little, was there discussion last week with regard to the impact of both the density and the nature of the building on surface water during certain times of the year? That is, the impact that increased coverage of the land with more roofs, more roads, more driveways, more sump pump activity, that sort of thing, that kind of data might change or have an impact on design considerations for stormwater? I mean, was that part of the discussion?
That was certainly raised for you, Mr. Mayor. The stormwater calculations are done, and it's required that the amount of stormwater that falls on that subdivision before anything is built does not change after the houses are built. So clearly, the roads, the roofs, the asphalt, the engineers calculate how much impervious ground there is, and then calculates how to manage that flow so that no more water flows out of this subdivision than would flow out of this subdivision if it was still green grass. So if you have more roofs and more impervious surfaces, yes, you need to do, it'll create a different engineering solution than if it were all green grass. But that is in fact what the stormwater management plan does, is manage that,
Thank you.
difference.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I certainly appreciate, and I'm sure that everyone in the room appreciates the developer is willing to go those extra miles to ensure that residents in the area are satisfied that what is going to be designed and implemented is going to meet the requirements of both the development itself and the impact of people around them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Other questions from members of council for our presenter? There being none, I do have a motion here. Thank you very much, Mr. Bedford. It's been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Papp, that the information and correspondence, 2 items, presented in the delegation by Mr. Stephen Bedford regarding the Oak Haven subdivision official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment be received. And call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you to our delegations. We'll get to those matters momentarily, but we do have one item under consent agenda. It has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Papp, that the following consent agenda item be received for information. Report TR 4312, 2012 annual debt repayment limit. And I believe the treasurer indicated that there's a change on this, so perhaps it should be as amended. Discussion to that. As amended. No discussion, we're going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. As amended. We'll now move to business subdivisions. The first is planning. Councillor Papp as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item we have before us has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak. That report P22/12, application for extension to draft plan approval, file number 21619-02004, Wheelan Heights, Oscar Wheelan, be received, and the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows. That for reasons outlined in report P22/12, General Committee, Planning and Development Division, recommend the council grant one-year extension to draft plan approval for subdivision file 2016-19-02004, Wheelan Heights, with a revised lapsing date of June 18th, 2013. And further, the applicant be advised that the additional extensions to draft plan approval for subdivision file 2016-19-02004, Wheelan Heights, shall not be considered. Members of committee. Mr. Larmer, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have one minor point. This report was from June 4th. It was anticipated that it would go to council this evening, and that's why it says June 18th, the
Okay.
effective date. The effective date should be July 16th.
So we'll have to amend that.
That would be the time at which this report
So
would
July
be
16th.
considered by
Yep.
council. That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Larmer. Members of committee? Comments, questions? Councilor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I expressed during my questioning of the proponent here, I do have concerns about extending beyond the 1 year, given the length of time that this individual has had to deal with it. However, in fairness, I would be prepared to consider an 18-month extension. That would give him a year and a half to bring this to a head, after which no extension would be put forward. That gives him an additional 6 months to assuage the issues and come to a resolution and move the development forward. I'd like to hear what my other members of council might have to say.
To put that forward as an amendment to this report?
I'll put that forward as an amendment.
That the actual extension be for 18 months. We need a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Seconder, Councillor King. To the amendment, comments, questions from committee? So this would go from 1 year to 18 months. So basically, it would lapse at the end of 2013. Councillor Durley and then Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Larmer, would 18 months be out of the question, or would it be detrimental to the whole process, or would it be harmful, or would there be any impact if we did extend it by that?
Mr. Larmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The region has recommended 1 year. I was initially not supporting an extension at all, for a variety of reasons. However, 18 months would not be considered to be out of reach of the 1 year that the region has recommended.
Thank you, Mr. Larmer. Councillor Ribbiak and then Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's just a comment with regard to expectations of performance with regard to this application. I'm not sure that I heard anything in the presentation this evening that would suggest to me that a year, 18 months, would actually make any difference to significant progress to the development. I read the report that our chief planner has provided. It is factual, detailed with regard to the circumstances that were involved there. I'm just concerned, I guess, that if we provide an extension of whether it's 1 year, 18 months, or even 3 years, that in fact anything further will go ahead. Mr. Whalen has provided us with one significant change, and that is that his brother, I guess, is going to be involved in the project with him, and that may make a difference. Whether it'll be enough for him to accomplish in what is, relative to the time that's gone before us, a pretty insignificant period of time, I'm not at all certain. So I have that concern.
Thank you, Councilor Ribbiak. Mr. Mayor, and then back to Councilor Kersey. Mr.
Thank
Mayor?
you very much, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions. The region, when it recommended 1 year, it did recommend no extensions. Is that correct?
Mr. Larman?
That's correct. They said that they would not look favorably upon additional extensions.
Okay. And the second, if no extension is given, I'm trying to get the dates right in my head, Mr. Chair, regarding the provincial policy statements and the green belt and all of that. I'm not the expert, so I want to hear from staff. If no extension is given, or a year from now, no extension is given, or 18 months, if this gets approved, what happens? It goes back, and all of the new planning rules and everything have to go on this site. Is that correct?
That's correct. Because this plan was approved in 2004, that was in advance of the places to grow and the new provincial policy statement being adopted by the province. So it is caught in the transitional policies where it's allowed to develop at this lower density. If the subdivision approval lapses, or the draft approval lapses, it will it will incur a new application, and it will need to meet the 50 persons and jobs per hectare.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the final question, I was at, I think, one of the meetings where Mr. Whalen had asked for the ability to service those, not service, to provide the extension of those 10 lots on Haste, to move quickly on those. He anticipated at that time, is my understanding, that that would help with the development. I'm looking to staff again. I presumed that Mr. Whalen would be moving ahead this spring, and my recollection was that he had indicated that if that hurdle had been jumped, and it was last fall, that he would be starting this spring. Just looking for clarity on the timeline, Mr. Larmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you look at attachment number 1, page 1 of 3, that's the draft approved plan. As the mayor indicated, there are 10 lots that front on the west side of Haste Street. And the stormwater pond, or the stormwater facility, that services that property is located at the northwest corner, so lower left of the page. It's identified as block 61. Mm-hmm. That is the area that the stormwater needs to go to, because it outlets along the westerly limit of the Whalen Plaza. So immediately adjacent station number 1. There's a pipe that goes underground there, and that outlets for the stormwater. The conversation that we had back in the late summer was that the 10 lots, there was a potential for them to be developed. Mr. Whalen would have to gain council's approval for the subdivision to be phased, and that there would have to be some preliminary work done for the stormwater management facility of some sort to be incorporated or built to accommodate these 10 lots, and that there would have to be easements established over the adjacent lands to allow the water to go through what's basically orchard land right now. There's some difficulty with that because it's a temporary measure, but we talked to Mr. Whalen about the securities that he was going to have to put up, because frankly, one of the issues that we have as planners is that pulling these 10 lots off of Hay Street is low-lying fruit. He could pull off those 10 lots and then allow the interior lands to just sit there for an indeterminate amount of time. So we had a conversation about if these 10 lots on Hay Street were going to go, then his consultant would have to design a temporary stormwater management facility, and he was going to have to put up security to ensure that the balance of the lands was developed. And that didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, that was my question. We're not entertaining an option to deal with that, to service those 10 lots, to, in a stormwater management perspective, Mr. Chair. So what I'm hearing from staff, and just, you haven't heard anything since those conversations?
No.
Well, that's unfortunate, Mr. Chair. Every time I've met with the applicant, he's indicated that he's moving forward in one direction, continue to move forward, and yet we don't see results. So I'm still considering whether I'm in favor of the 18 months or 1 year, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions of Mr. Lerma. And one comment. The first comment is perhaps one of the benefits of giving the 18-month extension is that it keeps the property under the old density rules. And if it lapses and moves to the new density rules, it's going to abut on a subdivision which has very large homes, prestigious homes, and it will be a concern to those homeowners who have invested into that subdivision. So that may be one motivating factor to extend to 18 months. My question to you, Mr. Larmer, is if we were to grant the 18 months, are there milestones that we could impose upon the proponent that he must meet along the way, failing which we could put a fail-safe in there that would force the issue so that we don't run into the same issues that we're running into with these 10 lots, whereby, there's been a reneging of the conditions and following through with things that we've agreed to. So is there a methodology whereby we could ensure that the subdivision would move forward and within that 18-month period?
Mr. Larman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Typically, the way it goes is that you give the approval for a set period of time, and they have until the end of that time to do it. It would be problematic in trying to set milestones because there may be issues outside of the control of the developer to meet those milestones. So it's generally, the general practice is to set the time frame. That's the deadline.
Second question. Councillor, you have any other questions?
Yeah. I'm just thinking of the methodology here.
Right.
Would it be appropriate for me to withdraw my amendment at this point?
You may do so. If your seconder agrees to it, then you withdraw the amendment.
I'd like to move that I withdraw my amendment.
Seconder, Councillor King.
I'll agree to that.
So we have no amendment.
To vote on that?
We have to vote on that, pardon me. All in favor?
In favor, or in favor of what? We're in favor of withdrawing it, or in?
In favor of withdrawing the amendment.
And reverting back to the original motion.
Why don't we just vote on the amendment and turn it down?
You can do that as well.
If that's the wish.
All right,
Okay,
well, let's do
I'll
it,
leave it to you.
let's do it, I'll
Whatever you're.
do the ruling on that. Let's, the amendment as it stands right now is to extend it to 18 months, as moved by Councillor Kersey and Councillor King. All in favor of extending to 18 months? I'm in favor of that. All opposed? Defeated. Okay, so we're back to the original report, and basically, without stating again, is that this subdivision file would be granted a 1-year extension. Any further comments or questions on that? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, Report P25/12, Applications, Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendments, Draft Plan of Subdivision File Numbers AM0210 and 2016-19-10001, Oak Haven Estates, Equimore Mortgage Investment Corporation be received, and the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows. That Oak Haven Estates Draft Plan of Subdivision File Number 2016-19-1001 be approved in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended, and the regulations thereunder subject to the conditions appended to this report as attachment number 1. That all parties be advised of Council's decision on this application in accordance with provincial regulations, and that the mayor be authorized to endorse the draft plan as approved 20 days after notice of Council's decision has been given, provided no appeals against the decision have been registered, and that the applicant be advised that the town's draft plan of this subdivision plan will lapse 3 years from the date of draft plan unless an extension of the approval period is granted by town council. If an extension is granted, an updated review and revisions to the conditions of the approval may be necessary at that time, and that the official plan amendment application AM0210 be approved to expand the Fenwick sanitary sewer area and reduce the lot area requirement, and that staff be prepared to present the necessary adopting bylaw for the consideration by council. That zoning amendment application AM0210 be approved with the lands being rezoned to a residential village 1 RV1 zone, a residential village multiple RMV1, and an open space zone, but that the bylaw not be passed by council until such time as the related subdivision receives draft plan approval and the appeal period for the draft plan has expired. Draft plan approval is expired. And further, that the amending bylaw place a holding provision on the zoning of the lands, and that said provision not be removed until such time as the subdivision agreement is signed and registered on title. Comments or questions? Councilor Ribia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make reference, first of all, to the delegation that we heard this afternoon with regard to this, which included an offer to include in conditions a couple of paragraphs, and I'm wondering whether we need to pass an amendment to include those. And if it does, then I want to move that.
Thank you, Councilor Ribbick. Let me just ask Mr. Larmer. Mr. Bedford has tabled a couple of suggested amendments to the conditions, and also a piece of correspondence from the MPCA. Do we need to amend it? Can we amend this, or do we need to send the report back for a revised agreement?
You can receive Mr. Bedford's, you could receive Mr. Bedford's presentation and direct that staff prepare a revised report with revised conditions
Okay,
for
that's what I was-
consideration to council on July 16th. That may be the cleanest way in terms of the numbering of conditions and ensuring that
Yeah.
it's put in appropriately.
We have received them already.
Mr. Chair, council has received the presentation and
Right,
correspondence already, so I would just shorten that a little bit
Okay.
to request the revised conditions back.
So the request would be to bring back the revised staff report that would include these conditions.
Correct. You could do that, yes, sir.
Do we hear direction to that effect? Councilor Ribbiak, seconded. Councilor Clark, any comments or suggestions on it? Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you. With particular regard to the suggestion about stormwater management, I think that's probably the single most critical subject on the minds of residents in the area, as I understand the situation to be. And I don't claim that my understanding is perfect, but in all of the discussions that I've had with people with regard to the direction of this development, what happens to the water in that location seems to be at the bottom of a great deal of concern. And I'm hoping that those concerns can be articulated in a way that provide further direction to staff with regard to conditions with regard to the draft proposal. One of those we talked about earlier, which was the possibility and the benefit of a study of the water table at a wet part of the year as opposed to the driest part of the year. As I understand it, people who know the area well and have known the area for a long, long time have a pretty good understanding of the behavior of water in that area. It's very low. The headland of 15 Mile Creek is in that area. Much of the year it is underground. My understanding is that there is quicksand everywhere. My understanding is that if there is a design error made on the basis of poor data to the stormwater pond, that in fact the pond, first of all, may not perform well and may break down because of the kind of groundwater and behavior of groundwater in that area, but also that it may create further difficulties and further flooding to properties around the area. People have pretty serious concerns in this regard, and people can articulate concerns, and they frequently do in these meetings, as we well know. Frequently, those concerns are voiced as opinions, as views. In this particular instance, we're hearing things that are much more data-based, much more technical, and it kind of tells me that if we're not certain that all of the technical data that could be available is in the hands of the developer, then serious errors could be made. And I want to include as a condition in this that studies, the right studies be done in sufficient depth to bring that information forward so that design work can be, that we can be sure that it's accurate, and that we don't have issues down the road as we do, for example, around other storm water management ponds that silt up, create issues, that sort of thing. So I'm wondering whether we can add that as a condition or give direction to.
I think we can give direction to staff. I think they heard that with Mr. Bedford's offered, and I think both the developer and to the benefit of the residents, that as much technical, detailed, as you say, forensic effort be made to ensure that those conditions, you're right, are met and that they satisfy the requirements that we require and of those of the residents. And I think the willingness of the developer, and what I heard Mr. Bedford say, is that they're prepared to do that. So that is something that I maybe read too much, but I think, Mr. Larmy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I get that impression with the recommendations that were given, suggested amendments that would come back in the report.
That's correct. I'll
Okay.
provide appropriate wording in the report, and I'll try to summarize so that council can be sure that I'm understanding what you're trying to convey to me.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Councilor Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And then, I'm sorry.
The letter given to us by Mr. Bedford regarding condition 18 states that specifically, that, not only shall the proper studies be done, but consultation with neighbors, and certainly that's an important factor. And having received this and given staff direction, I'm sure that Craig and his staff will give this due diligence. There's no question about that. So I think that truly is covered, and certainly it is a concern. We know that, and for that very reason, we'll give it as much attention as it deserves and more. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My understanding is this is an amendment, and I certainly am supportive of the amendment and appreciate Mr. Bedford bringing it forward, and also Mr. Woods with Equimar Corporation. Many have spoke about the stormwater management pond. I just want to speak about the soil. That is an issue out there with a number of the neighbors, and certainly the current owner had nothing to do with that, inherited the property, as it were. And so I really appreciate what the condition implies, that they will test the soil quality if necessary, have it analyzed, and clean up if needed. I mean, that's a huge step, and I think it really shows that the developer is interested in working together with the town and working together with the neighbors, that because that is an outliner that's been there for a number of years. People have been asking about it, wondering. well, hopefully this test will allow people to stop wondering and it'll be solved once and for all. So I wanted to highlight that as well as the stormwater management issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments? So what the direction is that we will ask that the report be brought back for the July 16th meeting with the changes that have been suggested, incorporated. And as all you know, that anytime if we're not satisfied with those again, we could send it back again and get it revised. But the whole idea is to ensure that we've covered all of the different prerequisites that we're looking forward to. So, Mr. CAO and Mr. Larmer, I don't think we need.
It's a motion.
We need a motion before us, and I need a mover or seconder that, and I'll read out the motion.
Ribia Clark, right?
Yeah, it'll be, that's right, pardon me. Councillor Ribbiak and Councillor Clark. That report, P 25/12, be received and refer back to staff to update the conditions of draft approval as detailed in the applicant's correspondence received as part of the delegation of June 18, 2012. Comments or questions? Councillor Christian?
Is it necessary for us to send this entire report back to staff? Do we not, could we not have confidence in staff that, given the information that's been provided by Mr. Bedford, the direction from staff, that staff be authorized to go ahead and amend the attachment number 1 agreement, and that we proceed with this full motion with the direction attached? I mean, I can't see the point of bringing the entire thing back to council if we're dealing with a couple of very specific issues here.
Well, Mr. Larmer.
If I may, the report that I would prefer to write is an addendum, rather than just repeating everything that's in it. And then perhaps the recommendation, should council choose to accept it, would be that the first clause of this recommendation be replaced with whatever report number it is, and the attachment number 1 there too. So it would replace the conditions that are in this current report.
Right, so that the second paragraph, instead of being attachment 1, the amended attachment 1 would become part of this.
That's correct.
Councillor Taylor.
Just, and for clarification, that report would come back to council, not back to general committee. So it would be dealt with at our next council meeting, right?
That would be my.
That's right, Councillor Derby. I think that's the way I understood it. And
perfect. Thank you.
So we're clear on that we brought directly to council on July 16th with the changes as noted. You're comfortable with that? Any more comments or questions?
Just a question. Does
Go
that
ahead,
mean we
Mr. Mayor.
can't ask any questions on other parts of the report, or?
Oh, you can answer it.
So after this is approved, we can still ask questions, or is it?
You can get
is
your
it done?
comb out, Mr. Mayor.
I have some questions on other parts of the report, and so I don't know if now's the time,
We
or?
have to vote on this first, and then we
Okay.
can go back to the original motion if we want to, but the way I understand it, that this is basically being sent back, but if, all right, let's just vote on this, that be received and referred back. This whole report is going back to staff.
Well, that's what, so can I ask some other questions not in relation to these two issues, but in relation to other?
All right, before then, all right, then
If you don't
ask the
mind.
questions.
Okay, thank you. The official plan for the town, Mr. Chair, talks about the densities, and so I just want to be clear on that. It talks about, under page 5, section 8, located within the Fenwick urban boundary, designated village residential. It's envisioned, as it says here, larger than average lots. So that's in the town's official plan, so I'm just looking for clarity. These aren't, some of them are, but some of them aren't larger than average lots. So there's something that supersedes that, and just looking for clarity on that from staff.
Mr. Larmer.
Thank you. There are two references to the official plan. The one is the current official plan, and those are the policies that begin numbered 1.14.1. And they say yes, the lot should be larger. That conflicts with the new official plan policies, and it also conflicts with the provincial policy statement and the Places to Grow Act. Those are the parent documents, the provincial documents that have to be considered in the consideration of draft plans of subdivision. As noted in the recommendation, there's two reasons to amend the official plan. One is for the Fenwick sanitary sewer area, and the other one is for the minimum lot area requirement.
Okay, thank you. The report from the NPCA, Mr. Chair, talks about 15-meter setback from the type 2 fish habitat. I don't know that I see that specifically on the plan. When will that, I guess that's for block 31, but I don't, 9 meters as opposed to the 15 that's suggested by the NPCA, so looking for clarity on that.
Mr. Larmer.
Thank you. The recommendation, again, that calls for the zoning bylaw to not be presented to council until such time as the draft plan approval, the appeal period has expired. When we deal with the zoning bylaw amendment, it goes to the Conservation Authority for comment. Has to consider Lisa Campbell's report. She was the biologist who prepared the report and had a recommendation on the setback. So that bylaw will go to the Conservation Authority, it'll go to the region, and it will come back to council. If it's anything different than what they had previously said, then a report will accompany the zoning bylaw amendment.
So it may not look like this at all.
It may not look exactly like that. And that was the reason that I said in the comments on the zoning and of the townhouse block, was that there are several issues. One is the setback from the fish habitat and just generally the grade of the land. And rather than just cramming in 48 townhouse units, because it says 48 townhouse units are required, they want to give some greater attention to that and establish what's right or more correct in terms of maximizing the units but still being sensitive to the land form and adjacent uses.
Okay. Well, that provides some solace, I hope. And the final is, and I'm not trying to put the fire chief on the hot seat, but I didn't see anything here, Mr. Chair, about the fire department commenting on the plan. Maybe that doesn't occur now, maybe that comes under the zoning and the site plan, is that correct?
Mr. Larmer.
I'll answer this one for the chief. The comments, this application was circulated to the fire department in advance of Chief Phelps coming on board.
I knew that.
The conversation that we had during the pre-consultation and the development coordinating meetings is that it's a through street, so it's improving access to the area generally. When it comes to the development of the condominium, that there's two applications that are required. Firstly, site plan approval,
Right.
and then the plan of condominium. And further comments will be received from the fire department and all departments and agencies at that time. We'll ensure that there's appropriate width, no dead ends or tight turns that wouldn't accommodate the proper movement of emergency vehicles.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your latitude. And council.
Good question. All right, so what we'll see, staff, we'll bring back the revised report on July 16th directly to council. Any further comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. And the final report. Moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that report P24/12 application for sign bylaw variances 145 Highway 20 East be received, and the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows. That for reasons outlined in Planning and Development Report P24/12 General Committee Planning and Development Division, recommend that council approve the application for sign bylaw variances to permit the construction of a wall sign at 145 Highway 20 East in accordance with the applicant's submission of April 23rd, 2012. Comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
I know, I'm all confused. Good thing they're numbered, I can't put them back in order. Yeah, I wait for that.
Oh, that's good. Let's do it.
Welcome to Corporate Services. Order of business before us, moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Papp. That report TR 44/12, the 2012 mileage rate increase be received, and that the recommendation contained therein be approved as follows. That the recommendation to increase the town's mileage rate allowance from 53 cents for the first 5,000 kilometers or less and 47 cents for 5,001 kilometers or more be approved, and that the town adopt the Revenue Canada agency's automobile allowance rates annually and advise council where there is a rate change impacting the town. Questions or comments? Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I take it that the last paragraph of that means that we would be adopting a process whereby these rate changes will occur automatically and will simply be informed of them?
I look at that. Defer to Madam Treasurer.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
Exactly right.
I would be happy to support that, Mr. Billy.
Other questions or comments? Councilor King?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just question whether this is the process that has normally been followed or whether you're following the region or something else.
The process that we would typically follow in corporate services was the Revenue Canada rate, because when you fall under any other umbrella, you're not considered to be reasonable, and then it brings on a whole bunch of other issues that you might have with respect to taxable allowances and taxable benefits. So the region, I think in the past they might have adopted the region's rates. However, this is being presented to go forward with the Revenue Canada so that we don't follow under those issues.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Quick question, then a comment. This is effective when? Effective council approval, and is it retroactive?
Yes and no.
I forget what I asked.
I have zoning in my head.
Good answer.
Yes, it's council approval, and no, it's not retroactive, right?
You're right.
Got it, perfect. Okay, thank you, Councilor, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. And the second, I do appreciate staff putting in the recommendation about the rate changing. I think that's a policy that we want to follow, and every year that we've been here, we've adopted the change as per the recommendation from Revenue Canada. So I think it's important for us to consider those kind of policy changes as we move forward and continue to deal with the policy level issues here at committee and council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Glad you agree. Other questions or comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just for my own edification, Madam Treasurer, are you telling us that if we were to adopt a rate that's less than Revenue Canada puts forth, that we would find ourselves offside from a tax standpoint? I could see it if, on the upper side, if we went above the rate, that we would be deemed to be, could be deemed to be unreasonable. But on the lower side, I don't see where that would create a tax implication.
It would definitely, it's either or. It's above or below. So basically, I don't want to get into too many tax implications here. But,
Taxes, so
yeah.
go ahead.
The requirement is to be reasonable with Revenue Canada. Anything other than that, it would be constituting a taxable benefit and allowing individuals to claim a T-2200 form on their income tax return, which in the end creates a lot more work for the municipality to make sure that those forms are readily available and so forth. So this is the best scenario. If if you're in discussion with Revenue Canada, they will indicate to you that it has to be exactly as their rate.
At which point we would no longer then have to file the T-22As.
We do not have to file them. However, an employee still, you still are mandated to provide one if they so choose to have one.
I see.
So it would be up to them under Revenue Canada to prove their difference there.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Compliance with them makes the road much smoother.
Oh, absolutely.
Questions or comments?
That sounds like a song title.
Councilor Ribbiak, you,
Thank you. I also appreciate that having a policy like this one places a limit as well, an upper limit on these changes. So this is ultimately of benefit to everybody, I think.
other questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? None opposed, that's carried. And the long-awaited appearance of Councilor Clark in CIS.
You're on, buddy.
We're now back on track. There are no reports. I think we're just looking at correspondence items.
Okay, we have a motion here, or first, welcome to Community Infrastructure. A motion here from Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak. That Community and Infrastructure Services Action Correspondence Item Number 1, Agenda Item 8.2 to B1, being a letter from Pelham Active Transportation Committee requesting a crossing light at Pelham Street and Churchill Street be received and referred to Community and Infrastructure Services staff for investigation and report. Questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, pose the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? None? Carried. Presentation. Okay, all right. I guess, Councillor King, you have a presentation, a verbal one, please?
I guess you skipped right over me.
I did, yes.
Yes, thank you. During the past year or longer, the residents along Hay Street on the north side of Highway 20 have continued to express safety concerns with respect to the increased volume of traffic and also to the speeding of that traffic. The development of lands on the east and west sides of Hay Street will further impact their concerns. The Community Policing Committee report of June the 4th listed 3 requests that group, because it is an individual resident who is representing residents on that area of Haste. They had 3 requests to address the safety concerns, and one of those suggestions was to have the community safety zone signs erected that already exist the other end of Haste. So what I would like to propose is that staff investigate the process of having community safety zone signs installed in that area and provide a report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Durling?
Thank you. Through you to Councillor King. How far down would you go? Just to the areas where the houses are, or would you consider it further because the road dips and speed up there?
It goes down the dip, whatever that hill's called, down the dip to Mettler.
Okay, you want to go all the way to Mettler?
Yes.
Or at least consider that. Okay, thank
Consider
you.
it, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
Just, maybe we should do it in a motion, just so that we have it. Just a suggestion.
Move a motion, I'll second it.
Okay,
Okay, then I will move that staff prepare a report with respect to the installation of community safety, or community, what is it called?
Safety zone.
Thank you, community safety zone signs along Haste between Highway 20 and Mettler Road.
Councillor Kersey will second that.
Installation of community safety zone signs. On Hay Street from Highway 20 to Mettler Road.
To Mettler Road.
Okay. Any further input, questions? Okay. You want me to read that
Yes, please. I'm sorry, who seconded?
out? Councillor Kersey. Okay, so the motion is that staff prepare a report to investigate the installation of community safety zone signs on Hay Street from Highway 20 to Mettler Road. Questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, put the question. All those in favor? Okay, carried. Okay, another motion here from Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor Durley, that Community and Infrastructure Services Action Correspondence Item Number 1, Agenda Item 8 8.22B2, being a letter from the Pelham Active Transportation Committee regarding the frequency of Sharrow markings on Hay Street, be received and referred to Community and Infrastructure Services staff for investigation and report. Questions or comments? Mr. Mayor?
Is it possible to, or one of the things I hope staff can look at, is it possible to add this to other line painting that's going on? I know that we're doing, some other line painting in the municipality, so just looking to that if that's possible, that's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
We don't have, Mr. Mandel's not here this evening.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think that could be possible. We haven't commenced that work yet, so we'll look into that, and if it's appropriate, we can add it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Durley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The request from the Active Transportation Committee not only deals with Hay Street, but it goes on to say that the frequency and Sharrow markings in the town of Pelham be increased to meet the frequency as per national standard. So I think that if we look at that as a guideline to come with a report, I think that will cover the whole town of Pelham, and maybe we can phase that in, but that certainly is there.
Any other questions? Will we add that to this, or how do you want to?
We can say, through you, Mr. Chair, on Hay Street be received, regarding the frequency of Sharrow markings be received for investigation and report to reflect national standards? Would that be appropriate?
As we received the letter, basically if we include that in the resolution, that I think will cover both topics.
Okay. Markings on Hay Street to meet the frequency of every 75 meters as per national standards.
Also through the town of Pelham as well. That's the other piece that the mayor brought forward.
And throughout the entire town. Okay, can we have a seconder on the amendment, please?
Seconder on the amendment, Councillor Pat.
Thank you. And we need to vote on the amendment and then the full motion.
Okay, so we need to vote on the amendment, which adds to meet the frequency of every 75 meters as per national standard and throughout the entire town. Okay with that, everyone all in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Okay, now the entire, the whole thing, yeah.
Okay.
So, all those in favor? There we go, thank you.
Thank you for your patience.
No problem. Okay. I think I'm done? Oh, no.
You got another one.
That's two. Okay, motion from Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak, that Community and Infrastructure Services Information Correspondence Item Number 1, Agenda Item 8.22C1, being a letter thanking staff for the sidewalk edging work completed along Regional Road 20, be received for information. Comments or questions? Mr. Mayor?
Nice to see quick response from staff. I know that the CAO has received some other information as well about compliments to staff, so nice to have these on council committee's agenda, and also that we receive them from the community. It shows that staff continue to do excellent work in our community and are responsive to residents, so thank you. Congratulations.
Okay. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. That's good. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, chairs. It has now been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Clark. Be it resolved, the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following matters in the Municipal Act 2001 as outlined below. 1, item under Municipal Act Section 239-2C, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, 1 item. 2, item under Municipal Act Section 239-2D, labor relations or employee negotiations, 1 item. And 3, item under Municipal Act Section 239-2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employee, 1 item. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. That motion is carried. The public portion, or this public portion of the general committee meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Give up.
I'd love to stay, but
Go ahead, no worries.
There.